Okay, so now I'm going to do a slab pot demonstration. This is for my junior high school class. If you're watching and you're not in my junior high school class, welcome anyways. I've created two slabs today. One of these I've left soft, the other one I took a heat gun and I dried it a little bit. You would ideally want to make the slab ahead of time. You guys should probably watch me work since this is basically the video for tomorrow. You'd want to roll out your slabs ahead of time, make sure you have enough of them, and then let them dry till the next day. Actually, scratch that. Ignore everything I just said, because I'm going to spend my own time this evening. I'm going to go over to the high school and I'm going to roll out a bunch of slabs and bring them tomorrow. So tomorrow when you get here, there will be slabs. But if you are not one of my students, you'd want to roll out the slabs and let them sit out. You can put them out in the sun for a little while, flip them over every once in a while, and try to get them to a point where they're stiff but not dry. You really don't want these to become dry, but you want them to become what's called leather hard in ceramics speak, where they kind of move. I'm going to be working a little more quickly than I would normally work if I was making something that I cared about. I'm going to start out by just cutting this into some shapes, because mostly I'm just talking about demonstration here. In terms of your actual project that you would make, I would assume that you'd put more thought into how you wanted to build this. You would probably want to start out by cutting out pieces out of cardboard or designing it on a piece of paper, and then using those papers as stencils to create your slabs. You do better than I just did in terms of cutting that. I'm gonna make a box if I have time to do that. Fairly smallish box. I should be using a ruler, but I'm really trying to keep this video short. So I've got fairly rigid slabs that they've had a chance to dry out a little bit. So I'm gonna be able to put this here. I'm just gonna build it a little bit at a time. I'm gonna leave this for right now, because I'm not sure how much time I have to make this video right now. Basically, what we're talking is about constructing using clay that's already been dried out a little bit. It's kind of like a slab. This is soft enough that I could bend it if I needed to. It's not breaking as I do this, but it's rigid enough that when I pick it up, it's not gonna be floppy. Okay, it's had a chance to dry out a little bit. If it gets a little drier than this, that's okay. If it gets a lot drier than this, it's definitely an issue. If it starts to change color, it starts kind of becoming more of a lighter brown, it's dried out too much and it's gonna be a problem. Okay. Step one, just like in the coil pots, you're gonna wanna use a fork. I'm going to attach this to this is what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to start out by scratching up this surface really rough. I'm gonna make it very, very rough. I'm going to do the same thing with this side here. And I'm going to take some moisture, I'm gonna put some water on it here and here. Because this clay has dried out a little bit, especially if it's dried to the point where it's at all stiff. If you can take a piece of your scrap and bend it and it snaps, it's probably really pretty dry and you want to be careful. So I've scratched this thing up significantly, okay? And I've scratched that up, and I'm going to really, really push that in. As I'm pushing it down, it's kind of squirting water out there because I really put the pressure, okay? Now it's sitting on top of this one over here. I didn't put it on the side, I put it on top. Now, I'm going to take some sort of tool like this, this works, and I'm going to, on the inside, I'm gonna take some of the clay from the top, I'm gonna push it down into the bottom. I'm basically gonna weld this joint, pushing that down into the bottom like that. Then I'm going to push back that way. Because just like in the coil pots, this is the joint, this is where it's likely to crack if it's gonna crack. I'm gonna go around to the other side. I'm gonna pull up from the bottom, like that, and I'm gonna push down like that, kind of welding that seam together. I'm going to take a wood rib or any kind of flat surface and push that across like that, which did a pretty good job of kind of cleaning up that edge. Okay. On the inside, I'm going to grab some fresh clay And I'm gonna roll a coil. Roll a pretty small coil here. Although if it's too big, it's not that big of a deal. I rolled a pretty small coil here, and I'm gonna fill in that gap that I created by doing that. Then I'm going to use a tool to clean that up. Now, as I said in the video with the coil pot, to some extent, perhaps I'm overdoing it a little bit, but like I said in the last video, this is where it's likely to crack. In the end, if this thing comes apart in the kiln, it's gonna be right there, most likely. It's unlikely to crack anywhere else. Now, when this thing has dried the next day and becomes stiff, if I were to pull this thing apart, it should not come apart on that seam. It should not, so you can see that it's not wanting to come apart because this has been really well welded together. Now, I'm going to be theoretical at this point because I'm not going to do the entire thing because I don't want this to be a long video. But I want you to imagine that I have done this one, which means I'm going to need to remove this much. And I'm going to cut it right here. So I've done this, and as you can see, I can get to all those joints, right? I can get in there and weld all that, and weld this, and weld that, and weld everywhere around there. So I've done a beautiful job of welding this whole thing together, and now I've got a 3-sided pot. And then I've got a 4-sided pot. This is pretty good. I'm just going to cut it right here. So now I've welded all of this together because I can get to all those joints. I can go inside here, weld that, weld this, and everything's welded together. And then I add this 4th side. Which has to be a little smaller than that. So I've got all this welded, and that last side is kind of hard to do because I got to get in there. It's kind of hard. So you might want to make sure you don't make this too small. If you make it too small, you can't really get in here. But my point is that at this point, where you've done this, and this whole thing is welded together on all the sides, and then you imagine how you're going to get the top on there because you can't get inside. You're right, you can't get inside. So you're going to have to go around, weld it as best you can along the top edge. And then, if you're making just a box, like a square block, then you could be done. You just do the best you can to weld it. But if you're making a lidded pot, then you could create this entire object, get it all welded together as well as you can, and then you could cut the top off and then get inside and deal with the welding on the inside of the pot, is what you could do. Now, this is an example of what's called slab building. We're using a stiff slab, and that is one of the projects that you have to do, but for the purposes of that assignment, all I require is 3 sides. Basically the equivalent of this, 3 pieces of clay. I expect them to be this to match that, to match this, meaning this shouldn't be overhanging this edge and so forth. I want something along the lines of this. 3 pieces of clay that fit together to create a 90-degree angle and create basically this, but welded together on all these other edges. That's what's required for this project. On your combination pot project we're going to be doing in class, you could do this, but then you're going to need to add some sort of another aspect to it. Now, the other demo I'm going to do today is going to be much faster and much easier. This is going to be your easiest assignment, which is also due Friday for those of you in my class, which is you could roll out a wet slab, and we're going to have various different texture things for you to use in class. This is the only one I could find today. I think the other ones are hidden away somewhere. But you can use this to apply a texture to your clay. And this is supposed to be dragons. I don't know how well it's going to look. I've never used this one before. But it's kind of hard to see, but there are dragons on there. Take a look at that. I'm going to cut out this shape here. And I'm going to, there's a couple options here. One, you can put something like this into another form, say like this. Let's do this here. And you can kind of press it down to fit. This is obviously not a beautiful form, but it gives you the concept that you can press your object into something and let it dry like that, okay? That is an option. You can also take some random shape, like this is a pumpkin that I made at one point. And if you had a positive form, you could press it over a positive form and let it harden to that shape as well. In class, we're going to have domed plaster. We have some other forms for you to put your clay over. If you're at home right now, you could be using a bowl, you could be using lots of things. But you do want to recognize that if you were to put it over this and do this and let it dry, it's going to crack, because as this shrinks, the plastic's not going to shrink and it's going to break. That's more for those of you paying attention at home. You need to make sure that you could put it over something like this, but then you would need to account for that shrinkage by leaving some sort of space around it. So for those of you in my class, if you want to bring something with you to lay your slab into, that's fine. But I do require that you do something else to this object. So you could lay it over this, let it harden, and then you could add a coiled foot if you wanted to, which would be like putting a coil on it. You would then have to, you would trace that. You would scratch it, you'd score it, you'd attach it really well, you'd get this thing really well attached. You could also add feet of some sort to it if you wanted to. Once again, this is gonna fall off in the kiln. You cannot just take a block of clay and stick it on there, it will not stay. Everything you do has to be done well. You have to scratch that up, perhaps use a little bit of moisture, and get it really, really well attached. Otherwise, you could just expect that it's gonna fall off. You do a ton of work on something, and one of the feet falls off, and the entire thing becomes very difficult to glaze. So this was your demo of working with stiff slabs and soft slabs, and that's what you need to get done by Friday if you're in my class. Otherwise, just enjoy yourself. Thank you. That's it.